Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our event today. People at Work, driven by data, distributed by design. I especially want to thank you today because in a world where all of us are looking at screens and listening through headphones, our eyes may be a little weary, our ears may be a little tired, and in that circumstance, for you to join us today, it's really appreciated by us at EXL, TechGig, and the entire team that has worked hard to put this event together. Well, we all know that the world has changed. There are many unanswered questions. Everywhere, in technology, in HR, in companies, people everywhere. But one thing is clear, that the world is not changing, it has changed. The status quo is not returning. We have done a lot of research, talked to a lot of experts, and that is clear, that the world is not coming back to where it was. But is it changing to a better place? Is the world becoming a better place? For people at work, especially, for HR, for companies, for all of us who work in companies, essentially for people at work, is the world becoming a better place? Let us find out. I am pretty sure that we will have a very interesting conversation, which will be meaningful for you, and hopefully also it'll be very entertaining. With that, now, let us join our panel. Welcome, everyone, to the final event of People at Work, driven by data, distributed by design. I'm very excited to have finally landed on the final event after many meaningful conversations with our panel of experts who is here, panel of thought leaders, HR leaders who are here with us today. Let me start by introducing them. I have with me S.P. Nathan, a good friend and Chief Talent Officer of Deloitte India. He's also the partner at Deloitte India and has been writing and has followed quite extensively on subjects such as these. I also have with me Wagner Denuzzo, who is the head of capabilities for future of work at Prudential Financial and kind of neighbor here in the New York area. Wagner's team also deals with workforce analytics, skilling, reskilling, and the entire area of future of work. Along with us today is also Kris Shankar, who is the global head of human resources of Infosys. You all know Infosys. It's a major company and has been at the forefront of a lot of HR innovation. So let me start straight away into this discussion with one question for all of our wonderful panelists. And the question is, this distribution of workforce, a lot of people call it remote, but remote work has always been there, like in outsourcing or even manufacturing. But what has recently happened is much more the distribution of workforce from an aggregate physical location, people working from anywhere. What has been the biggest surprise now that we are into this for about 6 months? Let me start with Wagner. What has been the biggest surprise for you as you see this as the head of future of work capabilities at Prudential?
Thank you so much, Nalan, for having me here. And thank you for asking me this question, because I believe we all were a little surprised by how fast we were able to adapt to a totally new world. We were surprised by how intimate our relationships with our co-workers, leaders became. And most importantly, I think we became much more human-centric in the approach to distributed team management. We are much more careful in being empathic towards our customers, towards our shareholders, stakeholders, and our employees. So surprises were many, but I think they were a positive surprise. At the end, I believe we are building a stronger connection with our people because now we care for their personal needs, their professional needs, and we are creating a community that really believes that we care about each other and we believe in the well-being of the individual to achieve high performance. So that's the positive surprise that we experienced.
So I can relate to all of that, Wagner, because for me, I have to say, a little bit of a skeptic of distributed workforce, but I was absolutely amazed and surprised by the level of, exactly to use your words, intimacy and closeness that brought, but also the improvement in performance. And that is something, Nathan, you and I talked about in our last conversation, but I don't want to direct you there. I just want to still ask you, what's your surprise in this new world?
My biggest surprise was the fact that you could have 85% of our population who are millennials who did not need to be supervised. So this is an incredible thing. Suddenly you had almost like more than 3/4 of an organization full of young people who always had a notion that there must be somebody who supervises them, start to work on their own, feel responsible for the job, the kind of autonomy that it gave them, and a sense of pride that they could yet do all this. So that was the first surprise. The second surprise was this whole notion of collaboration and how one has to engineer it and almost kind of teach this or help people learn about this was blown away by the tsunami of all of what happened when young people get onto this and without any of these fetters. Nobody tells them how to do it, and yet you find that they do it with such panache, and it is so easy for them. It comes naturally to them. A couple of other things that really surprised me, and Wagner touched upon this very briefly, this whole notion of connect. We always thought connect has to be a person to person. It's got to be a physical connect. Using technology to connect, as we are doing right now, is still a very powerful medium. And so this notion of how do you connect with people? And the last one is around how do people really develop? And the learning that has happened in the last 8 months is off the charts. It's not like people have to be told that they have to learn and they've got to chalk up a lot of these hours on learning and development through the several courses that are being offered anywhere. But the fact is people start to think, hey, I need to know this, I need to learn this. So instead of a push, there's been a huge pull for learning. And the whole thing predicated by what is my relevance? It's a function of the skills that I have, and therefore I need to learn about this. So these are the few things.
So, we are not even in the first 5 minutes of our conversation, and such powerful concepts are already emerging. So I am so excited about going with the rest of this conversation. And I have a question on technology, which you mentioned, Nathan. But let me go to that next. Kris, in this new world where so much of the workforce is distributed, and we've been in it for 9 months, and we've seen a lot of positive results, what has surprised you the most?
Okay. Yeah. I think the point was, we've all been working, remotely, yeah, whatever, 8-9 months. But the thing was, I think people have really risen beyond what we would expect from them. And there's been this kind of, this groundswell of people in terms of coming together and going out of the way to really make a difference. And if you look at all these, I mean, we've got 99% of our people working from home, and productivity is continued to, be good. And people have really found new ways of connecting, new ways of engaging. So they've been really, in a way, inventive in how they really come together. Yeah. So I think that's been that was some of our worries, but I think it's been one of the biggest surprises that and that's where I think the humanity has really triumphed, as you would say, that people have come together, they've gone out of the way, they've come up with new ideas of connecting, engaging, they've used the limited resources, but they've also done the best out of it. And there have been lots of small innovations over the last few months. So I think I think it tells me is there is this whole kind of energy in people that really that they'll bring alive and make things happen. So I think that's been for me a reassuring surprise. Yes, I was a bit worried, but I think it's been a great reassurance on the spirit of people.
Yeah, I think you used a very good phrase there, said that humanity has triumphed. And for that to happen along with inventive is the word you use, it has actually been a big surprise for me. And I'm sure you're maybe understating it. It's been a surprise for you and for a whole lot of other people. So Wagner, Nathan talked about trust, learning. And you talked about intimacy and performance. And of course, Nathan also talked about connect. These are all concepts. If you all put these and other concepts together, what is your high-level view on organization culture going forward? How will that evolve? Because many times we have thought that culture begins when you close the office door behind you and you enter somewhere. And then there is a world. If you are in some companies, there are slides and swimming pools and gyms and beanbags. But now we are at home. So maybe on our own beanbag, but not the company beanbag. So what do you think about this whole idea of culture in this distributed workforce?
It's interesting because to me, culture is always the outcome of whatever happens within an organization. It's a fallacy that we can build culture or manufacture culture. You don't do that. All you can do is to manifest the behaviors and manifest the norms that will emerge as culture. So to me, now we have an incredible opportunity because what we are doing is, what is the essence of what creates a good experience for the individual? And when I say individual, it's for the customer, for the employee, for all of us in an organization. What creates the best experience that will lead for you to really unleash your potential? So now we have an opportunity to start thinking about, how can I be authentic about being empathic? How can I be authentic about the needs of the organization? How can I balance those apparently polarizing thoughts, right? The employee well-being, but driving performance. Because now we need to really speed. We need to accelerate our transformations. We need to get ahead of our competitors however we can. So there is a push for higher performance. So the best way I can tell you is about leadership now. Now it's about leadership, because what we observe leaders doing is what we are going to do ourselves. What we observe leaders saying is what the messages are that we are going to take to heart. So now it's about leadership more than ever.
So if you speak about leadership, the concept that you brought in about authenticity in a world where you see the other person only through a screen. Mm-hmm. What are the implications? Are you naturally more authentic? Or can you in Instagram, celebrities are followed by millions of followers and people feel very close to them. They feel as if they really know these people whom they're following, and yet they've never met them. Can leaders do like that? Can they create a following amongst their employees like that with technology? So on the barometer of authenticity, where does technology help or go? Let me start with you, Nathan, and then I'm going to come back to you, Wagner, because you led us on the path of authenticity.
I think technology is a great enabler, Nalin. Many a time you sit back and say, is technology going to take over everything? that you have around humans. And yet, if you sit back, technology is a great enabler. The very fact that all of us are sitting out here and we are able to transact conversation at one end and be authentic with the responses at the other end, and you can make out the difference. You make out differences in the voice modulation. You make out differences in the way that when you connect with the eyes, then you will know that there is something that is flowing. Words convey whether a person is authentic or not, but more importantly, the intonation behind the words. So in a way, as much as you have technology, it's always about the person who's using that technology. Today, for instance, technology helps me to understand from an analytics standpoint what are the places that I got to worry about from an engagement standpoint. What are those places that I feel safe about? What are those areas that I really need to invest in? And when I start doing that, I do this with the notion that I need to connect, I need to care. Care can be demonstrated by just simply connecting with another. The very fact that today you call up somebody and you just ask the simple question, hey, how are you doing? That's all that it takes. And yet there is so much that comes in. We never, I would say 9 months ago, I don't know how many of us would use a telephone so well, or a Zoom so well, or a webinar so well. How many of us would use those very small emoticons that we have so well? The mails that you have, the thank you cards that you could send. You see this in proliferation today because somewhere there is a tug in your heart. Maybe you should have done more of that prior.
That's a very good, sensitive point. I absolutely agree with you. You're right. Simply asking, how are you doing, is making a lot of difference. But what I also notice is we are asking that question more often.
Yeah.
For some reason now. And that is a completely different thing than what we did before. Just like you said, I'm wondering why I didn't do 9 months ago. And then with these emojis and emoticons, or whatever you want to call it, we have now been able to accessorize our emotions a lot more. You know? We've been able to put a earring and a necklace to it. And I think our emotions are assuming some personality. So anyway, before I get to digress with my own little ideas here, Wagner, what do you think about authenticity in this world? And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's interesting that you're talking about emotions because
Yeah.
I think this is the beauty of what's happening. There is always a silver lining in every crisis. This crisis is incredibly powerful in helping people get in touch with how they feel and the difficulties that we are having emotionally. I don't know anyone that has been totally fine with what's happening. So now we are forced to be attentive to our own emotions so we don't manifest bad behavior. Because as you know, when we get stressed, when we are under a lot of pressure, usually we are not our best selves. Now we are asking leaders to be much more subtle, much more focused on how they manifest their words. And I like what Nathan said, it's about the words you choose. You know when somebody's being authentic, the intonation, how they speak, and what they choose to talk about. Leaders now, I see at Prudential, I have to say, our CEO has been incredibly kind. Every week he sends a message. And most, I would say 90% of the message is about the well-being, the safety, and the health of our employees. 90% of the comments. So it increases engagement because now we know he's being authentic about caring about us. And I can't say enough about that, especially now when people are struggling to feel safe. When somebody says, I care about you, things change very quickly and you get much closer.
Right, right. Absolutely.
You know?
And, of course, we live in the world of social media, and word clouds and things like that are means of expression. And I think if you made a word cloud about what people are talking about these days, I think the first time in my career, the word kindness has assumed mainstream place in management thinking.
Yes.
Which was not there before. I mean, as a general human value, kindness was very much there, but not as management thinking. So you're right. That has been very powerful. Uh, a big role in all of this, being inventive and indeed humanity, we've been talking about, has been played by technology. And we've said that how technology has helped us to connect better. We are actually being more close to people. So those are the very visible and immediately visible benefits of technology. But as you go forward and think about as an HR leader, technology and its interaction with employees or people or resources, whatever you visualize the future as, is technology for good or bad?
Well, technology is there, right? It's going to be there, and it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to really have a big influence on us. Now, good or bad is in our minds, and I think how we make use out of this technology. But but you're really going to see lots more technology coming up, lots more uses of technology, and I think that's where I think we've got to bring our own thoughts together. But I think what is important is how we use them. Yeah, technology can amplify stuff, but I think we got to really put the string of humanity through it, design the right experiences so that we can really get the best out of the technology, but at the same time also ensure that it kind of adds and amplifies the human element and not kind of pulls it down. So I think I would just say let's use technology, but put it in the right way, create things in the right way, and therefore you'll ensure that you get the most out of it, yet keeping the humanity and the people touch at the forefront.
So when you say that technology is there, we absolutely get it, and that it can amplify. That is going to be a big word, of course, and it can be applied for productivity, engagement, and all forms of experiences. So if it is going to be there, it is going to be there in a meaningful way also, is what you're saying. That has an implication for the capabilities and the design of the HR function, right? What do you see? Where do you see that is going? And what do we as HR people need to learn or be different from in the past to be able to use the technology in a, I think you said, a human-centric way or with a string of humanity?
Yeah. No, I think what we've got to do is, in the past, I think we've had, technology was like you kind of used it in some kind of work. But now what I feel is we've got to really look at employee experience as a series of what I'd call as a series of touch points where technology and people interact together. So it's people interaction, is the interaction of people with the organization and with technology. All those are employee experiences. So how do you, and therefore, if you want to make things different now, we got to look at these employee experiences much more in a granular way, design it, ensure that it kind of works well, and bring that human element in a way that really technology can amplify the human element lots more. Yeah. So I think the one difference would be to really look at this whole experience, the employee experience right through, in all these elements: interaction with technology, interaction with others, interaction with the organization in terms of systems, and see that all of that sit together properly. So I think that's the one change that we've got to make, and do it in a much more conscious, deliberate way.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, when all of that is happening, do you think it has an impact on, or a deeper impact, or an unintended impact on larger issues such as culture, leadership, or even the idea of employment, psychological contract with your company, all of those things?
Yeah, no, I think that it will have, Nalin, it will have. What you've seen now, this thing of people working remotely, and most companies have done it because of the social capital that's been built up. Over years, there is this culture, there is this kind of an understanding, trust that's been built up, and that's really come to the fore now. But I think you got to ensure that you continue to build that. You got to build that culture. And in the past, if you were to look at culture, I mean, culture has been built by leaders, but the physical surroundings, various artifacts around, they played a very important role. For example, a person joined a company, he would do an induction, you'd see the campus, he would go around, and and all of that really adds to the bit of culture and how you build the culture around there. For example, if somebody is in a company, if somebody's had a 20 years of service, then he goes to the kind of the canteen, and there's a plaque there saying here's completed 20 years. So these are all artifacts using the physical surroundings which really build some kind of culture there. So I think we've got to keep that culture alive. How do you build it in the new digital world is important. How do you get more leaders talking to people in a much more connected digital way is important. So I think all elements of ensuring the culture is continued in a kind of a new environment needs to be thought through, and we've got to do that. And hopefully, physical part will also still play a role. And maybe once things get better, then maybe we'll have to go back physically. And I think that'll getting the team together in a physical surrounding will also be an important kind of an element. You may not need people to be coming together to work, but you may still need them to come once or twice a week so that they can come together, brainstorm, think through, and continue to build that connect and connections there. So I think those will all have to be sustained, and we'll have to really start thinking. HR will have to start thinking about all of those, building of culture, sustaining culture in this new world. How can we use this hybrid remote as a way to really ensure that this connection is continued and built? So those are some things that we got to start working on as you continue to kind of look at it. So technology will have a big role, and I think we've got to use it to start building some of the culture. I mean, and therefore, how do you kind of keep it and kind of in a symbiotic way work with technology and ensure that whatever you've been doing, technology is another kind of element that's there in this whole picture, and therefore you continue to see that together you build something which is much more sustainable.
But let me just keep building on this idea then. Nathan, you introduced the idea of tech, and we are, of course, being enabled by tech. Technology in this future of work, and especially in relation to HR executing its responsibilities, good or bad?
I would say absolutely good. I'm partial to technology. I think there are a few things that we realize we need not have done all this while. There is a machine by the side, and we could have used this machine much better. For instance, a very, very simple thing, and we all use it, but let's say the simple chatbot that started 2 years ago, and all of us use chatbots. Today, you have piled on so many things onto chatbots that it really frees you up to make those conversations that are more important. So in a way, it takes away a lot of the burden. So technology is there by your side, and it helps you along the way. Today, so a person feels, okay, so I know I can use something. I don't necessarily have to be worried about, hey, is it going to take away my job? Or the only thing that we need to be careful about is to what extent will you use technology? And you and I need to be very careful about, are we trying to automate, let's say, kindness, the word that you use? You cannot do that. You can send a mail, fine. But the one that really, really blows people off is a very small 2-minute video. That is far more powerful than just sending out a mass mailer using people's email at one end and then saying, okay, here is a personalized message. One mistake along the way and the whole thing would crash. So I think we've got to be careful about till what extent will you use technology, and where will you use the human side, where will you use technology. Today, technology has taken away a lot of the burden of HR. And I think that's a very good thing. The second thing about technology is we never had used things like analytics very well. Today, analytics really helps us focus on what we ought to be focusing about. So it tells us a whole host of things. And I'll give you an example. I mean, today we would know to a fault what's the average tenure of a person who is staying in one particular kind of a role. And we also know this, that let's say it's, I'm just making this up, 400 days. Now, 6 months before the 400 days, if somebody were to spend time with that individual, there's every possibility that you would extend that tenure by some more time. Because what people need is just to connect. That somebody is interested in me and my career and my development. So all I'm saying is we can use technology because it really helps us and helps us to understand and helps to pop the things that we never worried. I mean, we never knew about. And I think now it's able to bring it to the front and center.
Great. So a lot of people use the word these days, amplify. It has been able to, technology has been able to amplify human efforts, not diminish them. So you talked about these short videos. TikTok, of course, is a huge example. But in the past, I would go and talk to someone. Now I can make a video and put some music, uplifting music in it. I couldn't have walked around with a boombox on my shoulder and be taken seriously, right? But I can integrate it in a seamless way and make it a nice and interesting message. But Wagner, Nathan is clear. Technology is good. What about you?
What I would say is I would try not to polarize it because there are great ways in which we are using technology, like Nathan said. And it's interesting what you're saying, because I was thinking, I'm a little worried about algorithms dictating who is qualified for roles. I'm a little worried about that. We are all using AI to infer skills. I think that's the incredible advantage of having AI in talent management, because now we can infer skills based on your experience, based on activities, based on projects you created for yourself, even for things that you do outside work. All those transferable skills together will create capability. So now we are moving towards capability building. And that's why we need the human and the technology to create that capability and differentiate ourselves. But to your point, Nathan, kindness is not something that an algorithm can decipher.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what differentiates companies with their customers. Customers need this emotional connection with people. You can see in customer services, the best in class customer service organizations have people. They are not chatbots. So I would say it's wonderful for us to use technology for what? To amplify messages and build that culture that we are talking about, to make things at scale. When you deploy things, now you can do it at scale. Upskilling, reskilling at scale now through technology is easy. You can do it anytime. But one advantage that I will point out is we have been telling employees that you should take accountability for your career. We are telling them that they are in charge. They are in the driving seat. Guess what? Now we gave them a super powerful car, because now they know how to infer their skills. They know how to explore opportunities that match their skills. They know how to identify the gaps in their skills to get where they want to go. So we are giving them in their hands everything they need to create a better career for themselves. So in that sense, technology is fantastic. I would just worry about who are you bringing into your organization. If you're using just AI, you might be missing incredible talent out there, because let's be real, diversity and inclusion is such an important piece nowadays, because some people might not write well in English. I just had somebody telling me some companies now, they're not asking for your resumes because they want to eliminate the bias, but instead they ask you to answer 4 questions. And based on those 4 questions, you're going to be interviewed or not. Somebody who is not great in writing already lost the opportunity, because it only matters is what you write. So you see, this very notion of compartmentalizing things We are going to use just these written questions. We are going to use just this interview, like higher view, the interview using AI and all that. We have to be careful with that. Every time we compartmentalize or polarize things, we lose the opportunity. So it's hard. It's a very complex world right now. But I have a little hesitancy in using AI for everything.
No, that's
Right.
good. That is a fair caution, Wagner. I think there is a balance, though, isn't it? The world has grown with measurement, right? So what you call today a meter was just a blank space, and somebody said, okay, if I put my one hand here and one hand here, and then there are 10 fingers, that's a meter. So that's first quantification. People were playing baseball before they said, okay, I can actually parameterize this and say, how many times does this person is on base? That's a percentage. So parameterization and quantification could lead to better outcomes, but we see your caution in this. I totally get that. So now let's just switch a little from technology and analytics to more in your personal space, not very personal space, but in this new world, what are you most excited about, or what are you personally working on right now in your organizations? What cause or idea are you taking forward the most? Let me start with you, Nathan.
So we are working on three things. One is, how do we really start to look at a workforce where we can use that, workforce and workplace are the three things that's really very high up on our agenda. So if I just put that into one, so I think that's one block of interest that we are currently working on. The second one that we are working on is mental wellness.
Right.
I think that's very, very important. As much as we talk about care, we're talking about kindness, all of that. I think a special focus on mental health and mental wellness is another one that we're focusing on. Yeah. And the third one is the whole notion about what is development. How do we develop our people? And how do we make sure that while we have opportunities on one end, and there's always pushing the bar, and today people are talking about let's move to skills instead of looking at their resumes and trying to find out whether this person is from a top-notch school and so on and so forth. The whole notion of we are also working on, so therefore this whole notion of working on the bias that we may carry and the unconscious bias, and how do we get people to get aware of that is another thing that we are working on. So if you're looking at those three parts, so work, we are looking at what is really happening to work overall within the construct of our organization, what we see around us with our clients and customers. Workplace certainly is a huge one because it's starting to move towards a hybrid work model where people can part work from home and part work from the office, because the notion that one can work alone from home and that's all that one needs is a notion that I would like to be careful about. I think we've got to be careful because I don't think we should rush into this too much. I think there's got to be a fair balance. And so we are experimenting with that. And today, we are also saying if we can trust our people to do a whole host of work, not in terms of how much time they have spent on a job, but the outcome, which is the whole thing around productivity utilization, which has gone up dramatically to the extent of 10, almost 15% in some places. So can we look at alternate talent models? Can we look at gig workers, part-time workers, people who want to work only certain portions of their time? And in all of this, can you also have within your workforce something called mass career customization, which means it's peculiar to each one, it's particular to each one, and it's not like one, you paint the whole thing with the same brush. You don't. So these are some of the things that were, and I want to spend a minute more. I think the next 2 years, we will be investing a lot of time, energy on mental wellness. I think if there's the one thing that this pandemic has brought about is the acute awareness of how this is more important. So wellness in all its spheres. Earlier, people were focusing on a couple of other things. You're looking at physical wellness at one end, financial wellness as another one, getting people to be aware of this and so on. And somewhere along the spectrum, one ought to have invested more time in the one that we needed to have spent more time, which is the mental wellness.
Yeah. Right.
We're going to be spending more time.
Sure. Yeah. So, Wagner, what are you working on? What exciting piece? But feel free to comment on anything that Nathan has said. And I'm particularly intrigued by the idea that you had of, when you provide all this learning, they are on a superpower car, employees now. And by the way, they can drive it fast and take it anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the implications of that? And what are you working on? It'll be great to know from you.
When you think about what happened with technology, open source became something so important, right? I'm trying to think about all this coming together now. That's the thing that we need to be very conscious about. Complexity is increasing. We can't get rid of complexity, but we can simplify the way we organize our thinking. But it's very hard because people are desperately trying to maintain their business levels of productivity and outcomes while transforming their organizations. So now you have ambidextrous leaders trying to manage these two dual realities. And yet you need to think about the complexity of the future, because if you don't do it, somebody will. And then you're behind again. So it's very tricky for leaders today. So I think you're right in mental health being the focus. I would say leadership is going through a crisis where we had leaders telling others what to do because they are the only ones who know. That went out the window with social media and everything. Went out the employees know more information than top leaders. Then you start demonstrating. So now you're role modeling, right? After telling, you have to show. Just show us what's good leadership. Yes, we had that in collocated workplaces. And by the way, I really like the workplace and workforce strategy because that frames how we should think. But now we are in a phase where we need leaders to share. In a distributed workforce, you have a distributed power dynamic, and leaders need to share. Leaders need to be vulnerable in front of their people because that's how you share the experience of being human and being a leader of an organization. And there is no downside to it. Every time leaders show up who they are personally, they get points of engagement. So now it's complex. Now, when you think about open source technology, remember we said the future is open source. Here we are, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud, and you'll see the open source market is trillions of dollars. So what I'm trying to translate here is workforce. The workplace today is open doors, revolving doors. My employee today that I give you opportunities to learn something, if they don't have an opportunity at Prudential, they will seek the opportunity somewhere else. And I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with people being successful regardless where they go, because they keep themselves connected to Prudential because we help them, support them all the way to the exit door. And they will come back. I myself, I was at IBM, I came back, I left IBM and came back. And I still believe I'm an IBMer because I had the experience. So what I'm trying to say is, it's about the experience you create for the employee, basically, period. That's going to be a perception that's going to lead to brand recognition or a downturn in how the public sees your company. And in the talent, in the war for talent, who's going to lose? the companies that have negative publicity. So to me, it's very simple. You have to just create the most positive experience for your employees, give them the tools, give them the opportunity to make decisions, and the workplace is a little more democratized.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an understatement, that it is a little bit democratized. It's a lot more democratized now. Absolutely agree with you. But I think you had a quotable quote there, Wagner, that there is no downside to demonstrating vulnerability. Maybe we can write a whole article on that, because so much has been ingrained in our heads that leaders have to know it all, do it all, and almost instruct. And what a difference that notion was to where we are now.
Yeah.
So let me just shift to one specific subject, which is related to our HR teams and HR organizations. And, we talked about technology, we talked about, Nathan, you talked about analytics, and Wagner, you've given a really good, insightful understanding of culture and employee experience and this whole shift in notion of leadership. In all this, there's so many moving parts. There are philosophical moving parts: authenticity, vulnerability, leadership, free agency, power distances. Then there is app design, onboarding app, data collection, and then employee experience through tech. How do you think HR departments or HR teams will change in this new world? Think about organization design. Will HR people become more product managers? Will they become less transactional people? That seems clear. Will they be more centers of excellence? How will things change, and how HR responds to them?
Yeah. No, I think, there's one, we've been talking of HR being, moving all operations out, and we never did it. So therefore, this probably could be one another opportunity to really make that happen. I think 3 or 4 big changes, Nalin. I mean, again, these are all. I think the first change is you're going to have, with so much remote HR possibilities, you're going to have and lots more digitization, or in a way HR being platforms, or technology use of HR. You're going to really free up more time of the HR business partner. So I think they're going to really be now truly having the time to do a lot more, and they're going to really start thinking of what else to do. Like we were talking today, in the past, what is the way to get the pulse of employees? In the past, we used to interact, meet, and be lots of this way to understand the pulse of employees. And now, since they're remote, other than an engagement survey which happens, let's say once a fortnight, what else do we have? So I think HR people have to start thinking about these things, working with teams much more, working with managers much more. So being truly a kind of a coach, being truly a partner is probably one of the things that I see HR business partners doing lots more. Use of technology and use of lot more in a way, service HR services being rendered remotely through either technology or through a kind of a shared service will also come up. And things that never in the past you could think now. For example, let's say career planning or career counseling. In the past, it was the role of the business partner, but now maybe you can do it remotely because somebody else can do it and it will still work well. So I think we can think of what were taboos earlier, now I think can move on and can be done remotely. So therefore, that's the other one that I'll see happening. Given the use of technology, I think looking at what we call as employee experience becomes much more important. So there's this new focus on employee experience being like a center of excellence, looking at employee experience in much more granular way and designing everything there. So that could be another area. The increasing use of analytics, the increasing use of this whole thing of wellness becomes much more important. I think in the past we did it, but I think now we see that becoming another key area of another center of excellence. So if I look at a center of excellence, employee experience, analytics, and the whole thing of wellness becomes important. And then we become, I think those would be some of the changes that I see. You'll have some new roles in HR. You'll have roles where you see how technology interface with people is being managed. So therefore, there'll be certain roles there, and see how do you really ensure that there are no biases. How do you ensure that there is this whole employee experience and this whole human element and touch is maintained? So those are some of the things that we probably have to do a lot more.
I think the HR jobs are going to change. We are going to be looking at broadly 3 different areas. I mean, you look at what is the famous Meister and Brown and the Harvard book review. They spoke to the 21 HR jobs of the future. And some of them are pretty different from what is happening today. A director of well-being, work from home facilitator, human bias officer, HR data detective, human machine teaming manager, future of work leader, distraction preventer, and a coach rolled in one, the gig economy manager, and so on and so forth. So clearly, I think there are 3 roles that one HR leader will have to start to don. Start to get to understand technology a lot more and find out how that technology can be integrated. That's one. 2, the investment of time that people will have to make in the area of well-being and really care about people has really been accelerated, and I think that's going to change. So that's the second big change. And the third big one is the role of a coach. When I'm talking about a coach, I'm not looking at a normal coach, because I think the person will have to be a certain kind of an integrator. The job of a HR leader has never been more important than what is happening right now. For a person who is in finance, it's a little more easy because they are looking at things which are tangible. Today, the role of an HR leader in managing the intangibles and making the intangibles as tangible, the invisible as visible, is going to be a huge shift. People who understand that they have technology on one side, the role of making sure that they play the conscience keeper of what is happening within an organization and the myriad changes that is happening to people within, and holding the conscience and being the conscience keeper of the people therein, I think are all the 3 roles. And there is an underlay or an overlay of technology, but that's got to be used. You can label this and give it different forms, but the basic tenet of what you need in an HR person in all the changes, you can't take this away, is making sure that you have the well-being of the people to heart. I think that role is not going to go away.
I know you're balancing technology and well-being, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. But there is no doubt that the engagement that HR people will need to have with technology has significantly got to be improved. They really need to understand how technology will provide, as Wagner was talking earlier, some unique experiences. Because you can have an app which does one thing for one company and the same thing for another company, but the way people experience that app can be very different. And that is where HR people may almost need to be like product managers to be able to construct the experience within a platform, which is unique to their own company. And how HR people will be able to do that will actually reflect how a company's sensitivity is versus another. So I totally think that technology will play a big role, and HR leaders will need to become very, very immersed in technology. At least that's my bias. Wagner, what is yours?
I have so many words for describing the HR leader of the future. But Nathan, I love what you said, because it allows us to envision a different world, a different profession. So I think we're going to have a maturity model for HR. And in this maturity model, we can have the from now to 3 years from now. It's exactly that. exploring technology to the max, centralizing operations in shared services, making sure that what we have envisioning for the last 10 years really is optimized. And we can optimize with the integration of technology, the process policies, and all that. Now, what's going to be new from 3 years to 10 years from now is the HR leader going back to not a generalist, but an ambidextrous leader, right? That leader is going to need to know what human performance means, what human behaviors lead to better performance, and how to structure your organization a different way. So what I'm trying to say is HR needs to move towards understanding organizational capabilities, because our role in the future is not going to be to run processes, run identification of hypo, or managing processes. This is going to be so outdated. Our HR leaders right now are very comfortable attaching themselves to cycles. It's the talent reviews, the chairman's reviews, it's the performance management review in the cycles, because that makes them feel that they are actively pursuing outcomes. I don't believe that in 3 years is going to be really a fallacy, because what we are discovering is that the employee experience is building each moment, is not in each cycle. Every time you try to make something natural artificial, you're not going to get the best outcome. So what I mean is human relations now are so much more dynamic. People are staying in jobs for 18 months. So this whole notion that performance management, talent identification, and we are building the pipeline for 10 years from now, that's going to be so outdated in 5 years. I tell you, in 5 years, not going to happen. So to summarize here, I think it's about creating the right policies, because policies have to change. We have all the wrong policies for our old world order. So policies have to change. Then we have to talk about practices. What are the practices that we want to embed in the organization to create that culture that we desire? For example, managers, that's out. Coaches are in. So managers don't need to manage performance, because people do cross-functional work that's squad-based, project-based. So the manager is not managing work. What they are doing is coaching people to be at their best and develop their careers. That's the role of the new manager. So, and then we go with products. Product owners will be very important, because they do need to understand end-to-end the life cycle of the products. And not only that, how do you adopt new behaviors and insert new practices into the organization? So I'm very excited what's happening, because organization design or capability, those things have not been really mastered yet by HR.
That is a very, some of the things you said there, Wagner, are very close to my heart. Certainly the idea that, we've been focusing on cycles and processes and keeping ourselves busy and increasing in our own eyes our self-worth. But definitely that has been the case. We even have words such as hire to retire cycle or performance cycle and things like that. So when there is not going to be a retire, the whole cycle is going to break. So I totally am with you that we'll be focusing much more on experiences and productizing them. And when we productize experiences, most often we will use technology, but there could be a possibility of productizing an experience without technology also. And then if I combine that with the range of very interesting job titles that Nathan brought up from his Harvard article, I think we are looking at a complete overhaul of the HR world here. And I personally feel it'll be driven much more by expertise than by enterprise knowledge.
Yeah.
So, earlier HR people said, oh, I'm working in this company. I know everyone in the company. I know its history. I know its policies. So it was enterprise knowledge. Whereas now I think HR, if I bring together both your points, will be driven by expertise. Am I an expertise in chatbot distraction? Can I develop a great onboarding experience? Am I able to use data for good? And all of that. So that is where I think HR is headed, and seems like it's headed in a good direction. Would you agree?
I do.
I do.
Okay, great. I think when we started this pandemic, we were all worried we are headed to some dark place. But looks like not just for HR, but for the world in general, technology for good, data for good, new experiences, more trust, more authenticity, more intimacy, which is what we started with Wagner. All of that is making us go to a better place. And that has been my conclusion talking with all of you. And if you agree with that positive conclusion, we can end this conversation at a high note.
Thank you very much, Nylon.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Wagner. And thank you, Krish, for joining us in this event, but also contributing before in the conversations we've had. And I'm sure the audience would have really learned something. But more than that, I hope the audience and us together can co-create what seems like an exciting new reality. And once again, thank you all, the entire audience who has been with us through this event, as well as has been watching or reading all the content that we've been putting out on the subject of people at work, driven by data, distributed by design, and what a new, wonderful world we are in, and we are so lucky to be in it. Thank you very much. And I would say stay safe, enjoy yourself, and see you soon. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. We have a number of questions. I think all coming up from this very interesting discussion that we've just had. Hopefully you enjoyed it and it was meaningful. Uh, I'll try to consolidate a number of questions into about 4 or 5 main themes. And on behalf of the panel, I'll try and answer them. So, of course, the first and the most often asked question is that do you see people working from home permanently or working from anywhere permanently in the future? Uh, I think that's a most important question. And I'm sure everyone will agree that the answer is we definitely see less people working from offices as we currently experience. And we definitely see more people working from home or anywhere else. There may be distributed offices near places where people live, but certainly to answer your question more specifically, we see that happening more permanently in the future. Most certainly we see that. And the other question is, and that I like this question because somebody's been very closely listening to us, is that if HR goes platform, then does analytics and technology become more important? And do managers have to know less about employee experience? Well, the answer is clearly yes for the first part, which is that as HR goes platform, more and more HR professionals, or every HR professional, will have to become very good at analytics and certainly understand and embrace technology. And in fact, employee experience, which you ask about, will also go on the platform. And like we have said in one of the articles before this panel discussion, that employees will start behaving like consumers, which is good. And we will have to start providing an employee experience which is no different from the user experience that most consumers have. So even employee experience will move onto a platform. And the next trend of questions, which is linked to this one, is, of course, what do HR professionals need to do in terms of their skills and capabilities going forward? And that's a very important question because things have changed, like we said in our introduction, and the skills you need to succeed now have already changed. So the first thing, of course, is most HR professionals will have to become good at analytics. And this does not mean you need to learn coding or data sets or Python, etc. but you need to be more quantitative. You need to be able to see patterns, and you need to be able to link them with the one capability which HR people should always have and hasn't changed. So you should be able to link your capability analytics with the understanding of the business. So knowing your business as much as knowing your people will always be critical. That hasn't changed. And one more thing that HR people will have to become better at is, like I said, technology. But specifically, they'll have to start thinking like product managers. So when you are in a consumer goods company or a car manufacturing, you think about how the product will appeal to a consumer. And you'll have to start thinking about your onboarding app the same way, or your HR operations chatbot the same way. You'll have to start thinking of these HR, you can call them aids or tools, as products, and how these provide the best experience. Because as you heard, we'll be moving from processes and cycles to experiences. So analytics technology will be new for HR. These will be new COEs, I think, but business understanding will continue to be there. And lastly, there are two very interesting questions. I'll try to close with those. The first one is, will AI be able to hire instead of a person? So yes, AI will be able to hire a person, but instead of a person, even I, who love technology and have so much confidence and am enjoying the new world we are in, even I am not so sure that the core reality of people hiring people will either ever change or change in a long time. So I'm not sure of that. And finally, a question from someone in Chandrapur, and thank you for logging in from Chandrapur, really appreciate that. And the question is, will the gentleman or person is interested in working with the ITES industry. And the question is, will somebody be able to work from Chandrapur now given the distributed workforce that we've been talking about? Well, my answer to that is, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. And we will certainly be trying to reach out to people like you, because absolutely, if people have the right skills where they are located, and that is the big point of this world of change, becomes really less important. And I am sure not just Chandrapur, anywhere else in the world, we will be able to link a distributed workforce and execute on the business requirements that any company has. And with that really positive view of the future, I would like to close and thank you once again for joining us. Really appreciate it. We would be happy, and we would encourage you to visit the exhibition hall, the kiosks, because that is where you'll be able to find some of the thought leadership papers from before, some of the past conversations, other materials, and stay connected. And absolutely look forward to coming back to you with some more developments on people at work, driven by data, distributed by design. Thank you for joining us.